There was still steam rising from the coffee cup when I walked in, and the house was supposed to be empty. For 6 years. January 1983. East Berlin. No briefing. No mission. Just me, an old key, and a lock that shouldn't have turned. I thought I was chasing a code. What I found was a version of myself that shouldn't exist. Photographs I never posed for. Recordings I never made. A message in my handwriting, warning someone not to open a door I don't remember closing. I'm not here to explain any of it. I just need someone to know it happened. Before I forget again, so if you're still with me, hit that like button. Subscribe if you're already uncomfortable, and drop a comment with your city and the time. I like knowing where in the world people still believe a house can remember what we tried to bury. Waiting Strange was quieter than I remembered. The street felt staged cleaner than East Berlin had any right to be in January. I passed the old bakery, boarded up since '79, and reached the door. Same cracked paint. Same rusted fixtures. But the lock, it turned like it had been used yesterday. The door groaned open, slow and spiteful, and I stepped inside. The hallway stank of wet brick and forgotten paper. I stood there, breathing it in. Not nostalgia. Something closer to warning. Like the place remembered more than I did. My fingers moved without thinking. Jacket pocket. Right side, metal penlight. Habit. I swept the beam along the corridor. Mold ate through the corners. Electrical cables hung loose like veins exposed. But no footprints. No broken glass. No forced entry. Someone had been careful. There, at the base of the stairs, lay the first sign. A crushed cigarette with the filter pinched backwards. That was ours. Langley taught us to do that. Mark the floor like breadcrumbs. No locals used that code. I crouched and picked it up, half expecting it to crumble. Still dry, not fresh, but not forgotten. That's when I felt it. The heat. Not. Warmth heat, like a radiator left on in an empty house. I moved toward it, toward the back room, where the old fuse box once hummed behind fake drywall. I pushed the panel open. Dead switches, all of them. And yet, warm air was coming from the vent. I pried the grate open and reached inside. A small draft, and something more metal. I pulled it out slowly. A keyring. 3 keys, unlabeled, except one had a tag scratched with Apfel 6. My throat clenched. Only 3 of us ever used that designation. 2 were confirmed dead. The third, well, he disappeared the day this house was supposedly shut down. They told me he defected. They told me he'd burned everything. They told me a lot of things, but someone had come back and left the lights on. I didn't hear the footsteps behind me. Not really, just a shift in pressure. An old instinct like the walls tightening. I stood, turned slowly. Nothing. Just the stairs. Just dust. But on the top step, barely visible. In the beam of my flashlight, someone had written a number in ash. 314. The same number that would come back later. In a place I wish I'd never reopened. I didn't sleep that night. Back at my flat in Charlottenburg, I sat with the keyring on the table, the one labeled Apfel 6, catching the lamplight like it wanted to be remembered. I hadn't heard that coding name since the operation went dark. Bulgaria, 76. A double agent extraction that never made it past the planning stage. The contact vanished before we crossed the border. They blamed local interference. We burned everything, except someone didn't. The microfiche came 2 days before I re-entered the safe house. No return address, just a torn envelope slid under my door. The word "seen," handwritten in German, across the seal. Inside, 1 frame. Apfel 6. A partial floor plan, our old extraction route, and a red X marked near the kitchen. Only 3 of us had that version of the plan, and 2 were already buried. So why now? I went to the archives, not the official ones. Those are for tourists and new recruits. I called in a favor. A man named Becker still owed me something from '68. He let me into the basement vault under Breitscheid Platz. No cameras, no questions. I asked for case file K2761, the failed Bulgaria op. He paused just long enough to register guilt, then said it didn't exist. Of course it didn't. But as I turned to leave, he whispered, "Try shelf 9, right corner. Look for blue folders. No labels." I did. Found one. Inside, a report typed. In Cyrillic, water damaged, sealed in plastic. 3 pages. At the bottom, a stamp from the East German Ministry for State Security. Not ours, not theirs, but someone who watched us both. The name scratched into the last page made my chest lock. Elof Bergstrom, the Swedish diplomat, last seen alive near Alexanderplatz. Declared missing in '82. Rumors said he defected or was kidnapped or drowned. All noise, but now he was linked to our ghost file? I folded the pages into my coat and left. I knew what I had to do. I returned to the house the next morning. The air was heavier, like it had grown thicker overnight. The door opened easier, almost expectant. I went straight to the kitchen. Floorboards groaned underfoot, resisting. Under the 3rd tile, near the cold water pipe, I found it, a hollow space lined with wax. Paper. Inside, a flash drive. Too modern, too clean. Planted there recently. Back in my flat, I plugged it into a burner laptop. 1 folder, 1 file, a still image, 3 figures seated in the old safe house living room. Timestamp, April 1973. Of them was Elof, the other. Looked like me, but I had never been there in '73. And that's when I started to doubt whose memory this really was. The carpet hadn't moved in years, maybe decades. Dust gripped its edges like a second stitching, and when I pulled it back, the air shifted. Beneath it, just as I remembered, was the wooden hatch. I hesitated not because I was afraid, but because it looked different, too worn. The splinters along the edge were fresher than they should have been. I knelt down. Scratches, not random ones. These were deliberate. 4 parallel lines angled outward, like someone had tried to claw their way out, not in. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. No creaks, no groans. But there was something in absence. Like sound itself had been drained from the space below. I pried it open slowly. The scent hit me first. Old electricity, copper dust, the bitter trace of mold. The crawl space hadn't changed much. Still tight, still coffin-shaped. I lowered myself. In flashlight trembling in my hand, the communications box was there, just like we left it, military gray, dented at the corners. The lid opened with a soft click. All the internal components intact, but the outgoing cable had been severed from the inside. That wasn't protocol. That was containment. Someone had wanted to stay cut off. No calls, no extraction. A message had been scrawled in grease pencil on the interior panel. Reroute denied. Fault is above. Above? I climbed back up and scanned the room. That's when I noticed the vent. Too high to reach without the old step stool, which still sat where we used to store the backup radio. I pulled it under the vent and climbed up. Inside was a crumpled paper napkin wedged behind the mesh. On it, "Don't leave until he says your name." That was all. No signature. Just that. I sat back on the floor, knees cracking louder than they used to. My mind ran through names. Mine? Bergstrom? The man who vanished? Or the one who had my face in that old photo? Before I could finish that thought, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Not from outside, not from below. I leaned back toward the crawl space and listened. Tap, tap, pause, tap. It wasn't mechanical. It was human. Morse. And not just any code, Anne. Old field variation we used in Berlin back when CIA handlers weren't supposed to meet in person. The last time I heard that pattern was 1974, from a man they said died in Sofia. I whispered the response, and the tapping stopped. Something had heard me. I went back the next morning with gloves, a thermal scanner, and a voice in my head I hadn't heard in years. His voice, the one that used to debrief me in the garden behind Glienicke. Calm, calculated, always 2 moves ahead. Now it echoed with a strange urgency. The kitchen door stuck halfway. Same as before. The hinges had swollen from moisture, or maybe from being held closed too long. I gave it a firm push. The stale air curled out, heavy with rust and something faintly metallic. Then I saw it. On the counter, under a layer of grime and dust, sat a porcelain cup, white, with a blue ring. Our standard issue back then. My breath caught. I hadn't seen one like that in years. I put my hand near it. Warm, still warm. There was no one else in the house. I swept it top to bottom the night before. No signs of entry, no alarms tripped. And yet, the coffee had been poured less than an hour ago. I reached for the cup. As I lifted it, something brittle shifted underneath, a tiny crack in the base. Inside, a rolled piece of parchment. I uncurled it slowly. Single number 314. I sat back on the floor. That number again, burned into ash on the stairs. Scribbled in the archive, now hidden inside a cup. I knew that address. 314 Friedrichstrasse, the residence of Elof Bergstrom. Officially, he'd been recalled to Stockholm. Unofficially, he vanished the week before the house was shut down. I checked the handwriting. Cyrillic slant, left-handed, just like Elof. Why send me this? Why here? I scanned the walls. Any new markings? Any loose tiles? And then I saw it on the fridge door, a smear. Grease or maybe blood, but drawn deliberately. A circle. Inside it, 3 vertical lines. An old cipher tag used by our field units for loop compromised. It meant, stop checking. You've already been seen. I pulled back, fast, left the kitchen and shut the door behind me, even though I knew it was pointless. Whatever had been in there, whoever was already gone. And yet, as I reached the hallway, I heard a faint sound. Porcelain, on wood. Cup had been moved. I didn't go back to check, because somehow, I already knew when it would show dot. The dots came without sound. 1 second, we were frozen in diplomatic hell to sides, staring across a fog-drenched strip of concrete. The next, the mist lit up with specks of red dot, tiny, perfect circles. On chests, on necks, on foreheads. I felt one settle right on the base of my throat. Not moving, not wavering, just waiting. Someone on our side whispered, "Hold position," as if we had a choice. I kept my eyes forward. The imposter was still standing there, composed, hands behind his back. He didn't flinch when the lasers hit him. He didn't blink. That's what unnerved me most. Any real prisoner, especially one fresh from solitary, would have reacted. A twitch, a step back, a glance to his handler. He did none of that. He was ready. Davis stepped up behind me. "We call this off now. It's war," he said through gritted teeth. "You say one more word, it goes hot." But I wasn't thinking about war. I was thinking about the eyes behind that red dot on my chest. Whose trigger finger was it? East? West? Or someone else entirely? Because here's the thing about lasers. They don't tell you where they're coming from, only where they'll end. I tried to breathe shallow, slow. My body locked into place, muscles screaming to duck, to move, to do something. But protocol said, still. I could hear radios crackling faintly on the other side. Russian? German? Couldn't tell. Too distorted. Too calm. Like they knew we wouldn't shoot. But I wasn't so sure. The man in front of me. His eyes had shifted again. Just slightly. Now he was scanning the bridge. Not for escape. For confirmation. That's when it hit. Me. He wasn't scared of being shot. He was waiting for it. Like the bullet would trigger something else entirely. Not death. Activation. And that's when I made the smallest move I could. A single step back. Half a foot. Just enough to shift the laser off my throat. It moved with me. That meant it wasn't a bluff. It was tracking. Live. Davis hissed. Don't move again. But I already had. And I'd seen what I needed to see. This wasn't a standoff. It was choreography. And we were the only ones dancing blind. I asked to see his wrist. Not as a question. Not with fear. Just a calm command. Low and quiet. Like we used in interrogation rooms when bluffing wasn't necessary. Left wrist, I said. He didn't hesitate. He brought his arm forward slowly, gracefully. The sleeve rolled back with unnatural ease. No tremble, no resistance. Just the smooth reveal of skin trained to perform. And there it was. The tattoo. Same one Stepan had in 61. Crude hammer and sickle. Burnt halfway off with acid. Branded just above the wrist bone. A mark of loyalty gone wrong. It was there. But wrong. The ink was too clean. Too centered. And the skin beneath? No scar. Stepan's arm had texture-thick, keloid flesh from the burn. I'd seen it up close, smelled the rot when it peeled. This was smooth, imitated. I turned slightly toward Davis, but didn't speak. Just enough for him to catch my expression. He didn't nod, didn't blink, but I felt it. He knew now, too. The Soviet envoy stepped forward, shouting in German about breach of protocol, falsified demands. His voice cracked under the pressure, but I didn't move. Neither did the imposter. He let me look. Let me see the lie, which meant he wanted this discovered. But why? Why go this far to be caught? Unless getting exposed was the next step in the plan, the observers from Sweden shifted awkwardly, making notes, whispering into handhelds. The East German soldier who'd been filming turned his camera slightly. That wasn't random. That was stage direction. And suddenly the whole thing felt fake. Like we were inside a theater, and I was the only one who hadn't been handed a script. The imposter lowered his sleeve again. No words. Just that smile. Same smile from earlier. It wasn't smug. It was resigned. Like he knew I'd do exactly what I was doing. And maybe I was. Maybe I was playing right into it. Because here's the thing about fake tattoos. They only matter if someone is meant to notice. And I had. Too late. You can fake calm. You can fake protocol. But you can't fake your pulse. I saw it. Right there under his jaw. Just above the collarbone. That rhythmic throb, steady and deliberate. Not fast. Not panicked. Measured. Like he was counting. Someone whispered behind me. Call it off. Another voice. Stand by. But the world narrowed to that flicker in his throat. It wasn't adrenaline. It was focus. This wasn't a man who feared execution. This was someone waiting for a condition to be met. My mouth dried. Because if he wasn't afraid of dying here, then maybe dying here wasn't the plan at all. An American officer, one I didn't recognize, stepped beside me and murmured, "If you push this, it all falls apart." He wore civilian clothes. No name, No badge. Wrong. No one outside the agency was cleared to speak here. I glanced sideways. He was holding a thin folder. My folder. I hadn't seen it leave my hands. How did you? I started, but he was already turning away. The man in front of me, the imposter, hadn't moved. Still waiting, still watching. That pulse, steady, and then it hit me. He was watching the American officer. Not me. Waiting for a nod, or a signal, or a shot. That's when I knew this wasn't a Soviet op. This was joint. A double blind. I was just the trigger. Not metaphorically. Literally. If I challenged the identity any further, if I broke the illusion completely, it would detonate something far beyond this bridge. I don't mean bombs. I mean narratives. Timelines. Files. The kind of thing you erase people for. I turned back toward Davis, but he was speaking into a radio, expression blank. He wasn't calling Langley. He was listening, and he didn't look surprised. I felt that pulse again, but now it was in my own neck, rising. I clenched my fists, just enough to feel blood push through my fingers. One move, one word, and I'd flip a table I never even knew existed. So I stood still, like him. Like all of them. Counting. 4. Who would flinch first? I switched to the fallback channel, the one they drilled into us at Peary, in case everything else went dark. Channel Kilo 3. One frequency, one use. Emergency escalation to Langley. I pressed transmit. Immediate verification. Confirm ID on Stepan D. Co-authorization Echo 67. Nothing. Not. Static. Not interference. Just absence. That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was design. I checked the battery. Fine. Antenna. Secure. I even tapped the housing instinct more than reason. No click. No feedback. The line was dead, which meant I was dead. Not yet physically, but officially. Because when Kilo 3 goes silent, you're off the board. Davis gave me a sideways glance. No surprise in it. You're out, he muttered. I didn't answer. He already knew. The imposter stood still, hands folded. No. Less soldier, more witness. Because that's what this was, a performance. I wasn't part of the operation. I was part of the set. The swap wasn't real. The threat wasn't him. It was the second act, still hidden behind the curtain. And they needed someone loud, someone unstable, someone whose file said emotional tendencies under stress. That was me. Langley didn't cut the signal because they lost me. They cut it because they didn't want me answering anymore. I turned away from the bridge, scanned the tree line near Potsdam. That's when I saw it, a car, low profile, no lights, moving along the B1. Wrong timing, wrong direction. I knew the route logs. No diplomatic traffic scheduled outside the corridor. But this car, it was gliding like it had clearance. And the road it followed? It didn't lead to a checkpoint. It led away. Someone else was being moved. And this whole standoff was just smoke. I stepped forward again, closing the distance between me and the imposter. He didn't react. Of course he didn't. His role was complete. I was the only variable left, and I had two choices: expose the play, or stay in character. But I'd already broken the scene. Now I just had to survive the exit. It wasn't the make. It was the timing. Diplomatic vehicles in Berlin had their rhythm appearing at checkpoints like clockwork. Registered, filed, logged by both sides to avoid misunderstandings. But this one slipped past all of that. A black Volga, headlights off. No escort, moving along Bundesstraße, one like it belonged there. Except at DIDN single quotes T. The observers didn't even flinch. Neither did Davis. But I watched it crawl past the line of trees, tires barely kicking up gravel, as if trained not to wake the ground. That car didn't come for the bridge. It came for something else, Dot, I whispered. We've got movement on B1. Davis didn't look. That's covered, he said. By who? No answer, because he wasn't surprised. Dot, of course not. Because this was the real operation. Dot, all that tension, all the dots on our chests, the frozen exchange on Glienicke. It was theater, a smokescreen. The man in front of me wasn't meant to go back to the east. He wasn't even meant to matter. He was the distraction. And I was the noise. They knew I'd challenge it. Knew I'd see the wrong pocket, the missing scar, the pulse. They needed a rogue. They got me, Dot, and while the world held its breath at the midpoint of the bridge, the real asset, the one no one wanted to log, was slipping quietly through Berlin. Headed west, I stepped away from the imposter. Turned toward Davis. You set me up? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. His job was to keep me busy. Mine was to keep everyone watching. And the Volga? Already gone. I checked my watch. 7:41. Which meant, if they timed it right, the real subject had already cleared the southern perimeter. I wasn't guarding a swap. I was guarding a lie, Dot, and for a moment, I wondered who was in that car, Dot, someone with a bigger secret than Stepan DK. Or maybe Stepan himself. And the man they gave us? Just a mirror. A whisper of a name. A vessel with the right voice, the wrong. Past and no future. I looked back at him, still standing. Still silent. The perfect decoy. And me? The perfect idiot. He stepped out of the fog like a ghost I thought I'd buried in Virginia. The Soviet colonel, mid-50s, impeccable uniform. The kind of face you don't forget, not because it's remarkable, but because it saw too much. Dot, at first, I didn't believe it. I blinked, turned my head, looked again, but it was him. Colonel Gregor Malinov, Camp Peary, 1952. He didn't wear that name then. Back then, he was Instructor W. A ghost assigned to teach us how to lie better, deeper. His specialty, disappearing, while making others believe they hadn't seen you. We all thought he was Eastern Bloc, but no one dared confirm. Dot, in 54, he vanished. Rumor said he was killed in Hungary, but now here he was, standing next to the decoy, and he saw me. Not just look, saw. Recognition, not alarm. And then he smiled. Not smug, not cruel. Sad, like a man watching a pupil fail a test he didn't want him to pass. Then he did something I'll never forget. He raised 2 fingers. Tapped them once against his own temple. Dot, it wasn't a code. It was a memory. The signal he used at Peary when we were being watched. Used it maybe twice. Meant, don't speak. Don't move. Not here. I froze, because if he was alive, if he was standing here, in uniform, beside the fake Stepan, then the whole game had always been deeper. Even Camp Peary had been compromised. Even the training was part of this play. I wanted to step forward, ask why, demand who he was now. But then he raised his hand again. This time, palm flat, fingers wide. Dot, stop. No violence. And I got it. Not intellectually, physically. If I acted, if I yelled, if I drew my weapon, the charade would collapse. And the damage wouldn't be just diplomatic. Dot, it would be historic. Dot, because this wasn't about a trade. This was a reroute. A myth in the making. And I was standing in the middle of it, watching my past reappear in a uniform that never belonged to him, but somehow always did. I'd never felt a trigger that light before. Even with gloves, even with rain soaking through the fabric, my fingers settled like it belonged there. Dot, the imposter was still frozen. Malinov too, but the red dots had multiplied. I counted at least 8 on my side. 6 more on theirs, and 1 still steady on my neck. Davis whispered, do it, and we're ghosts. I said, We already are. I raised the pistol slowly, not aiming at anyone, but they didn't know that all it takes is movement, the suggestion of aggression. And for a split second, the entire bridge held its breath. Not metaphorically literally. You could hear boots shift, thumbs slide along safeties. A cough choked off mid-spasm. Then I pointed up to the sky and pulled the trigger. One shot. It echoed like betrayal, louder than it should have been, longer. Davis lunged forward, but stopped. Halfway. The observers flinched. Malinov didn't move. The imposter blinked. Only once. And then everyone started breathing again, because I hadn't broken the game, just cracked it. The shot wasn't aimed at a man. It was aimed at the story, and it ended it. The Soviets lowered their rifles first. We followed. Someone from the east shouted in clipped German. Exchange suspended. No argument, no protocol, no panic. They just turned, walked their man back into the fog. And us? We stood there, like statues, soaked and empty. The mission was done. Or undone. I handed my sidearm to Davis. Report it as a misfire, I said. He didn't. He reported it as insubordination. They pulled my clearance within 48 hours. Debriefed me in a room with no clocks, no names. Then reassigned me to desk work in D.C. I never saw Berlin again. But sometimes, on a winter morning, with just enough fog, I hear that shot, echoing off nothing, still aimed at no one, still breaking something we never really understood. They said it had been boxed up for years, donated from a closing consulate archive. No chain of custody, no BARCODE, just a stack of forgotten files dumped into the basement of a university library in Maryland. I wasn't supposed to be there. My ID didn't open that floor anymore. But sometimes, a favor called in at the right hour still gets you. A key. I spent 6 hours combing through mildewed folders and empty jackets. And then I saw it a spiral notebook. No cover, pages curled from damp. Smelled like ash. But on the first page, in black ink, block letters, SDK. I sat down hard, not from shock. From confirmation. I flipped the page and read the first line. Also pretended not to recognize you, so I wouldn't have to kill you. My throat locked. There was no signature, no date, just a list of names, places, moments. None of them in the files. All of them real, including me. He'd written it like a journal, or a warning, sometimes just a sentence, sometimes full recollections. And in between the pages, drawings, rough maps, sketches of the bridge, a copy of the bird tattoo. But on the AV. Last page, just one word. Rehearsal. The same whisper that came through my dead gums. I traced the word with my finger. The ink had bled slightly, still legible, still permanent. That meant he was there, at some point, in that car. And maybe the man on the bridge had never been fake, just unfinished. A piece of step-in, a version trained to stand still while the real one slipped past. I closed the notebook, didn't take it, didn't report it. Just slid it back into the box, buried under meaningless memos. Some ghosts want to be found. Others, they write just enough to remind you they're still watching. I never filed a formal complaint. Never asked who approved. The second car. Never mentioned the notebook. Some stories don't need confirmation. They just need to outlive the silence. Years later, when it rains hard enough, I still hear it. That single shot cracking the fog. Not as a warning, but as a mark. Like graffiti left on the skin of a city that forgot who walked its bridges. They scrubbed me from the rotation after that. No more field, no more briefings. Just static and silence. But sometimes I dream of that bridge. Not the dots, not the lies, Just the sound of a man smiling without reason and the red cloth waving from the wrong pocket. He never raised a weapon, never broke character. He didn't need to, because by the time we met Dot, he'd already won Dot if this story stayed with you. Subscribe and comment what you knew about the Glienicke Bridge and what you never saw coming.